Most people don't fail because they're lazy or unlucky, they fail because they stop at the exact moment things were about to start working. And the frustrating part is, when you're in that moment, it doesn't feel like progress is coming, it feels like nothing is happening at all. You've been saving, cutting back, trying to be disciplined, and yet your bank account barely moves, your stress doesn't go away, and it starts to feel like you're just stuck in place. So naturally, you start asking yourself a quiet question you don't really want to admit out loud: what if this just isn't worth it? And that's usually where people quit. Not at the beginning, not when things are clearly hard, but right in the middle, when effort is high, results are invisible, and patience feels like a losing strategy. The problem is, most people misunderstand what progress actually looks like, especially when it comes to money, and because of that, they expect something that was never realistic to begin with. We're used to progress being obvious. If you go to the gym, you expect to feel sore. If you study, you expect to understand more. If you work more hours, you expect a bigger paycheck. There's a clear connection between effort and outcome. But money doesn't work like that, at least not in the early stages. In fact, for a long time, it feels like the opposite. You save $200 this month, maybe $300 the next, and after a year, you look at your account and think, that's it? Because the effort felt big, but the result feels small. So your brain starts doing what it's designed to do, it tries to protect you from wasting energy, and it whispers something that sounds reasonable. And that's where most people get it wrong. Let's imagine someone like Alex. Alex starts taking money seriously for the first time. They cut down on unnecessary spending, stop upgrading things they don't need, and start putting aside $400 every month. It's not easy, because that $400 used to go toward comfort, convenience, small rewards that made life feel easier in the moment. Now it's just gone. Months pass, and Alex checks their savings account. It's growing, but slowly. There's no dramatic shift, no moment where life suddenly feels easier. In fact, it feels slightly harder because they're constantly saying no to things they used to enjoy. After a year, Alex has around $5,000 saved. And here's the uncomfortable truth: that doesn't feel like freedom. It doesn't feel like security. It just feels like a number. So motivation starts to fade, not because Alex lacks discipline, but because the reward doesn't match the effort emotionally. And this is where delayed gratification starts to break down for most people. Because delayed gratification sounds simple in theory: sacrifice now, benefit later. But what people don't realize is that later is usually much further away than expected, and now feels much heavier than anticipated. The delay isn't just time, it's uncertainty. You don't know when things will get easier. You don't know what the turning point looks like. You don't even know if you're doing enough. So instead of feeling like you're building momentum, it feels like you're just waiting. And humans are not very good at waiting without feedback. We need signals that things are working. We need evidence. We need to feel progress, not just believe in it. And money, especially in the beginning, is very quiet. It doesn't give you obvious signals. It grows slowly, almost invisibly, and because of that, it creates a psychological gap between effort and reward. That gap is where most people quit. Because from the outside, quitting looks like giving up. But from the inside, it feels like making a rational decision. It feels like adjusting to reality. It feels like saying, I tried, but this just isn't worth it. What people don't see is that they weren't failing, they were just early. There's a phase in every long-term financial journey where nothing seems to change, even though everything is changing underneath. Your habits are improving. Your awareness is sharpening. Your spending is becoming intentional. Your tolerance for discomfort is growing. But none of that shows up immediately in your lifestyle. So it feels like effort without reward. And that's the illusion. Because progress is happening, it's just not visible yet. Think about someone like Jordan. Jordan also starts saving, investing, and being more intentional with money, but instead of expecting results quickly, they accept something most people avoid. The beginning is supposed to feel slow. Not broken. Not pointless. Just slow. Jordan understands that the first phase isn't about outcomes, it's about stability. Building a base. Creating a system that works even when motivation disappears. So instead of constantly checking for results, Jordan focuses on consistency. Month after month, the same actions, the same habits, the same decisions. And for a long time, it looks exactly the same as Alex's situation. Slow growth. Minimal visible change. No dramatic improvement. But something different is happening beneath the surface. Jordan doesn't expect the effort to pay off immediately, so there's no disappointment when it doesn't. There's no emotional drop. No urge to quit. Just quiet continuation. And this is where things start to separate. Because while Alex is questioning the process, Jordan is reinforcing it. While Alex is looking for results, Jordan is building momentum. And momentum in money is strange, because it doesn't feel like movement until it suddenly does. At some point, something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but noticeably. The savings start to feel meaningful. Unexpected expenses don't create panic. Decisions become easier because there's a cushion. And slowly, life starts to feel lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because there's less pressure. Less urgency. Less fear. That's the part most people never reach. Not because it's impossible, but because they stopped just before it became real. This is what invisible progress does. It hides the reward long enough that only consistency can reveal it. And if you're measuring your success based on what you can see right now, you'll almost always feel behind. Because the early stages of financial growth are not designed to impress you. They're designed to test you, to see if you can keep going without validation, without excitement, without immediate results. And that's uncomfortable, because we're used to things that reward us quickly. Social media, entertainment, spending, they all give you instant feedback. Money, when handled properly, does the opposite. It delays the reward. And because of that, it filters out impatience. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right but nothing is changing, that's not a sign that it's not working. It's a sign that you're in the phase most people never get through. And that's actually a very important place to recognize. Because once you see it for what it is, it stops feeling like failure. It starts feeling like progress in disguise. And that shift changes how you behave. You stop chasing visible results and start trusting the process. You stop asking, is this working, and start asking, am I consistent? You stop looking for motivation and start relying on structure. And that's where things begin to compound. Not just your money, but your mindset. Because the real turning point isn't when your bank account hits a certain number. It's when your behavior becomes stable enough that the outcome is inevitable. That's when life starts getting easier. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. Bills feel less stressful. Decisions feel less heavy. Time feels less pressured. And the interesting part is, when you reach that point, it doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It just feels normal. Like this is how things were always supposed to be. Which is why it's so easy to underestimate how close you were when you almost quit. If you think about it, most people don't actually fail financially. They just interrupt their own progress. They start, stop, restart, stop again, and every time they stop, they reset the invisible progress they were building. So instead of compounding forward, they keep circling the same starting point. And over time, that creates the belief that nothing works. When in reality, nothing was given enough time to work. If you like thinking about money in a way that actually reflects real life instead of perfect scenarios, you'll probably find the rest of these ideas useful too, because most financial advice skips this part entirely. It tells you what to do, but not what it feels like while you're doing it. And that's the part that determines whether you continue or quit. So if there's one thing worth holding on to, it's this. The hardest phase of progress is the one where nothing seems to change. Not because it's actually stagnant, but because it's building something you can't see yet. And the moment you feel like stopping is usually the moment right before that hidden progress starts to show up in a way you can finally recognize. So instead of asking whether it's working, it might be more useful to ask, have I stayed consistent long enough to find out? Because most people never do. And the few who do don't have a completely different strategy. They just stayed long enough to let it work. And once it does, everything feels a little easier, not because life changed overnight, but because the pressure slowly started to disappear. That's the part no one talks about. And that's the part most people quit before they ever experience.